This is Rob Melancon. You're listening to Walking the Floor. That's Melancon, not Melancon.
I'm walking the floor over you.
Walking the floor.
I'm walking the floor. Walking the floor over you.
Hola, senors and senoritas. This is Chris Shiflett, and you are listening to Walking the Floor. Greetings from beautiful Reykjavik, Iceland, where we kicked off our Foo Fighter summer tour last night. And it was awesome. We had a great show. I haven't been up to Iceland in a really long time, but I'm happy to say it is still amazing. Been eating lots of fish. Been sleeping with my eye patch on because, you know, it never ever seems to actually get dark here. That's cool. What I do, it's a day off, so I went to the Blue Lagoon and I soaked in those nourishing blue waters and I rubbed that white shit all over my face and, you know, just generally had a very nice, relaxing day. We're leaving to go to Helsinki tomorrow. I'll be sad to leave this place because I really do like it here. It's a lot of fun. And, you know, on the way out to Reykjavik, Iceland, I stopped off in London. I did a couple of shows, couple solo acoustic shows. One of them at the 100 Club. My good buddy Rami Jaffe got up, played a couple songs with me on the old accordion. That was nice, kind of filled things out. Then the next night, the next day, I sat and did promo all day long. So look for all those interviews out on the internet. Interviews, reviews, all that sort of good stuff. It's all out there on the internet. And then I played a show with my buddy Sam Palladio over at the Water Rats, which, you know, I played Water Rats like, I don't know, 10, 11 years ago with Jackson United. And my memory of that place was that it was kind of like a dive bar, but it's been turned into sort of a nice, slightly more upscale kind of gastro-pubby club, and I loved it. Thought it was awesome. Loved the Water Rats. They took good care of us. They took good care of us both nights. And by us, I guess I mean me? I don't know. I guess I'm not used to traveling without the boys in the band, but it was good. I think it was the first time I ever really honestly enjoyed playing solo acoustic like that, because that's really scary generally, but those shows were super duper fun. And now I'm just off to the continent to travel around and play festivals and whatnot all over the place, and that should be loads of fun, kicking off a busy summer of tour. And as you can see here, I am desperately trying to keep up with the podcast and you know, hanging in there so far. And today's a good one. Oh, let's do a little gear roundup. I've actually gotten a bunch of different requests this week on the Twitter for different things that people would like me to cover. One of them was, what was it? Compressor pedals. You know, to be honest, I really don't know too much about compressor pedals. I only own one, and I really haven't even used it that much. I think it's that one made by Gothic. It looks like the EP Boost, but it's white. I don't know how to use compression on a pedal board. So if anybody has any tips on that, let me know. It always sounds like I'm doing it too much, and I kind of get why. I guess I don't like compressor pedals. That's probably what I'm getting to. But there was another guy on there asked me about the EP Boost and whether or not it's bass heavy, because someone was asking, wanted to find a boost pedal. And to me, the EP Boost is pretty much like the best pedal in the world. It's like the one thing I cannot live without. I use that thing all the time. I've never noticed it to be bass heavy. But then again, I generally have earplugs in, so kind of everything's bass heavy. I hate wearing earplugs for rock concerts or for anything. It's the worst. It's the guitar tone killer, but I'm trying to save what's left of my hearing, so I do it. So no, I've never noticed that the EP Boost is bass heavy. I know if you take the bottom off, there's like a little EQ switcher things that you can mess with. I've never even messed with that, to be honest with you. I usually just set it right about just shy of the halfway mark. And that's kind of my sweet spot. Probably, let's say like 10 or 11 o'clock is where I put the dial. And that, to me, works pretty good with most things. All right, why don't you get on over to Zounds.com and get yourself an EP Boost, because I'm telling you, you can't live without them. And Zounds makes gear affordable. And they have absolutely free shipping on every order with no minimum purchase required, no exclusions. And, never forget, every person you talk to at Zounds is a real musician. Zounds.com. Come on, people. Get on over there. All right, let's get to the interview. All right, my interview today is with Mr. Rod Melancon. He's got a great new record called Southern Gothic that just came out, and I highly recommend you go check it out. It is, in fact, produced by my good buddy Brian Whelan, who not only produced it, but plays, I think, most of the guitars on there. It's really good. Rod is an up-and-comer in the Los Angeles Americana scene, but his heart and his writing never strays too far from his Louisiana roots. We had a great talk. Hope you enjoy it. This is Rod Melancon on Walking the Floor. I guess first off, we should just start with the correct pronunciation of your last name, so I don't screw that up.
Yeah, it's Melancon.
Melancon.
That's it. Yeah, that is it.
Okay.
That's good.
Okay. See, I would have definitely butchered that. So I'm glad we got that out of the way. Is that like, I know you're from Louisiana.
Yeah, it's a Cajun name.
Cajun. Mm-hmm. What, I'm like totally ignorant of the sort of cultural differences between, like, what is the difference between, what is Cajun versus Creole versus
Cajun and Creole
else?
is basically the same thing for the most part. But Cajun, especially names like Melancon, is predominantly found in like South Louisiana.
Okay.
So I grew up in
part of Louisiana?
Southeast. Yeah, I grew up in Southwest Louisiana.
And that, like, where you came from, I know you've lived in LA for what, how long now?
10 years, a little over 10 years.
Has it been that long?
Yeah, crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
But your music is like heavily influenced by
is.
where you grew up, right?
Yeah, it is heavily influenced by where I grew up. I moved out here when I was still 18 when I moved out here. It was like 2007.
Okay.
And so I wasn't playing music or anything like that yet. It was, I think, kind of missing home and missing Louisiana is kind of what got me into songwriting in general, I guess.
Really?
Yeah.
Because when you came out here to act, is that right?
Yeah,
Did you grow up in
yeah, my mom was a theater teacher, so originally when I came out to LA, it was with the intent of doing something in the film world, I guess. Because I was a huge film buff as a kid. I always loved film, and I loved theater. I loved plays. But I started writing songs because I got a guitar for the Christmas that I moved out to LA. I went back home and I got this little acoustic guitar. And that was kind of the beginning of it for me. I also gave my pa, who's my grandpa on my Cajun side, I gave him this like double disc Hank Williams thing because I knew he was interested in Hank Williams, or at least I just figured he probably was.
Right.
And so I gave
that's interesting because usually that would have come from the other way. Usually it's your grandpa giving you the Hank Williams records.
Exactly. I gave him the CD, and he went in kind of the corner of his trailer home, and he put it on his little CD player, his boom box, you know. And I watched it kind of just like transport him to a different place. I watched him listen to this thing and the way it was affecting him, and it totally was kind of like waking ancient feelings and taking him to a different time. And it made me think about music in a way I hadn't thought about music before. I'd always liked music, but I kind of realized what music was capable of, especially that kind of songwriting and that kind of, you know, world. And so I came back after that with this intention of like, you know what, I want to see what I can do. I want to see if I could write songs. I want to try to, you know, learn enough chords to try to construct my own thing. And that was kind of the beginning of it for me.
Had you done much singing, like in theater?
Oh, yeah, a little bit of singing. I wasn't really crazy about it. I was more interested when it came to theater, like when we would do one-act plays or more of the drama side. But I did do the musical side. But I just wasn't really crazy about, you know, I never felt truly comfortable doing those things. But I did do singing in theater, and I think when I was in the 9th grade, I finally decided to quit chorus. I wish I would have stayed in chorus because I didn't really mind it. I I was 14, and by then chorus just wasn't cool in my mind, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was kind of the beginning for me, man. This Hank Williams disc. I decided to get my pa, and my pa, I had heard a story when I was a kid that he met Hank Williams in the early 50s in Shreveport. He claims he was...
because Hank Williams, didn't he live there for
Well, he
a
would
time?
tour through there a lot.
But wasn't he on a radio? Like, not the Grand Ole Opry, but
The
another...
Louisiana Hayride.
Yes.
And my pa was with his buddy at this bar, and it was like 1 a.m, and they were all drunk. Well, his buddy was definitely drunk, and he said Hank Williams rolled in with this other guy. And my pa's friend was like, hey, you dare me to go ask him to yodel? And my pa was like, no, man, don't do that, you know. But the guy did
he's
it.
Gonna kick your ass.
Yeah, the guy did it, and Hank Williams yodeled, and then before they knew it, they were all just hanging out till like really early in the morning. So I knew my pa had this connection to Hank Williams.
Yeah.
But I didn't know that I would come to have this connection with Hank
was
Williams.
that the type of music you were listening to up to that point anyway, or what were your influences prior to that?
Prior to that, I was music was something I was interested in, but it was never a huge important part of my life. I always liked the classic rock station as a kid, and I always liked a lot of the bands my dad would listen to, but it was never really that big of a thing to me. When I was in the second grade, I went a huge Elvis phase.
Right.
I saw a photo of him in a Cracker Barrel gift shop outside of Lafayette, and I was like, wow, that's the coolest looking dude I've ever seen. I didn't know he played music. I didn't know nothing about him. I just thought he looked cool as shit, you know?
Oh, he did look pretty damn
cool. So I talked my parents into buying me this thing, and then I came back home, and I was like, I gotta find out who this is, you know, this new discovery, at least in my head. And so it turns out...
There's this new guy out there named
exactly.
Elvis.
I remember bringing that photo to school for no reason, just to be like, you gotta check this guy out, man. And so I went through a hardcore Elvis phase. I loved his music, and I loved all those cheesy films, but I never tried to play his music, or I never tried to perform his music. You know, I didn't think that was something I was capable of or could do. You know.
Yeah. So when you're inspired by the Hank Williams records you gave to your grandpa to start writing, so you're learning to play guitar at that point, and also learning to write songs.
Yeah. So it was easy because Hank only uses like 3 chords a song. So that was easy for me to learn one of his songs and then pick up one of those new chords. Like that's how I went about learning enough chords to like structure a song.
Right. Hey, that's a D7.
Exactly. You know, now I know about 7 chords, but that's enough for me. More than enough.
Now, did you take a lot of lessons or anything?
Mm-mm. I never took any lessons of any kind when it came to music. I just sort of was like self-taught in the sense of I just listened. You know, kind of the same way a filmmaker will like maybe not go to school, he'll just watch.
Right.
Learn how to cut, learn how to edit, learn how to play shots. That's kind of the same thing with me. I just listened, you know.
Right. Well, where does there's like a melancholy to your songwriting and to your lyrics specifically. Where do you think that comes from?
I'm not sure where that comes from exactly, but I don't know. Maybe just growing up and the situations I saw, they weren't all sad. There's a lot of joy in the South. People like to have a good time, but I always thought there was kind of this underlying sadness with a lot of things growing up in the South. You know, predominantly poor, lots of fear of the afterlife and whatnot.
Were you raised religious?
My parents, they weren't necessarily super religious. Like, remember my dad every now and then would be like, all right, let's go to church on a Sunday or something, but not very religious. But I did go to like Sunday school in the summers until I became an adult in the Catholic Church, which is like confirmation. And I was never interested in that. I felt like I never bought it. Because there was something was just off, you know what I mean?
There's something I'm not. Yeah, it doesn't quite ring true for me.
Yeah, something was off, man. And I remember a moment exactly where I was so this catechism Sunday school, it's like 2 weeks until you're like 16, and then you become an adult in the church. But I remember I was 14, I think, and I had a math tutor who was like 2 years older than me that died in this car accident. And I remember the teacher that summer was saying, well, guys, you better hope that he, you know, went to confession, because if his soul wasn't cleansed when he died, there's a chance he might have gone to hell. And I remember hearing that and just being like, what the fuck? That's not true. And then I kind of looked around, you know, and all these kids are just eating this up. And I was just like, man, I do not fit in this bunch, you know.
That is
I'm not buying this. Yeah.
I wasn't raised religious. I had different, you know, different versions of that exact same moment. I think that's really common in artists. Just that whatever it is, it doesn't have to be religion or whatever it is. Just that feeling of like, I'm the fucking odd man out here.
Yeah.
and I know it, and all these people know it.
Yeah, that was the case, man. I mean, there's moments in my childhood that are spread out where religion just seemed like this strange thing that was kind of, you know, and not everyone is this way, but used to manipulate or used to, you know, get one's way. Like, one of the craziest things as a kid is I remember my cousin claimed to be possessed. And so everyone on my dad's side was like, oh my God, you know, he's possessed. We got to figure this out. But 2 days prior, he had found out his teenage girlfriend was pregnant. So I was like, well, this dude's just using this as like a diversion to get the heat off of his back, you know?
Right.
But they all were buying it, man. And I was just like, God damn. This is a strange place. And then you grow up, you know, now I'm 28 looking back at all this. And I'm like, there's a lot of strange events involving religion as a kid.
Well, you know, do you, like, your songs have a lot of characters in them.
Sure.
Are those characters that are drawn from your real life experience? Like, are those the people that you grew up with and knew?
Sure. And speaking of my Cajun side, most of them spawn from that side. Like that song Perry is about a cousin that I never met, but my dad was real close to. And then The Lights of Karen Crow is about my namesake who was killed in a motorcycle crash. And both those songs are told from my dad's point of view. It's as if he's telling the story because when I was a kid...
I was wondering that. Because that song in particular, I was like, wait a minute, Rod wasn't even alive back then. He's not singing about his brother. Whose brother is that? You know?
It's my dad's brother. And my namesake, his name was Rod Melancon, you know.
Oh, so that's a true story?
That's a true story, and Perry's a true story, too. When I was a teenager, I started getting in these little scruffles at school and stuff, and... I remember my mom telling me she was worried I was going to turn out like my cousins, and I wasn't quite sure who she meant. And I remember my dad taking me to the cemetery in Rain, Louisiana, and it said Perry Fauché, still doing time. And I was like,
that's
shit.
On his tombstone?
That's all it said.
That's fucking amazing.
I was like, holy shit, man, what was this guy about, you know? And then my dad told me the story. He died at 28, and he was in and out of prison most of his life, and I got all these kind of, you know, interesting details about that guy. But as a kid, he was just kind of this almost legendary figure in my mind, you know.
Right.
The toughest guy in Lafayette. No one really wanted to fuck with him. And the only thing that could kill him was, you know, his own mistakes. He seemed like he couldn't be defeated by anything.
Right.
You know? But
couldn't be defeated by anything, but dead by 28.
Yeah, his decisions is what did him in at the end of the day.
Well, while we're on the subject of your lyrics and the sort of, you know, pulling characters from your life, do you, in fact, have a white Trans Am?
Oh, man, I don't, but I'd love to have one. I would love to have a white Trans Am. I'd love to have a Trans Am any color, probably black, but I could just picture myself on the one-on-one with that goddamn Trans Am and, like, fog hat blasting out the speakers.
So what, like, when you were growing up, what was your family life like? You know, did you have siblings, and what were your parents like? Can you describe a little bit? Like,
sure. I grew up outside of any town in this farming community called Wright, Louisiana, W-R-I-G-H-T. There's this big rice mill off of the freeway that says if you lived in Wright, you'd be home now. And it was very small, and it was just basically rice fields and crawfish ponds. And when I was a kid, my dad had a crawfish pond, and we would farm the crawfish pond. Yeah, I think he got rid of it by the time I was like 9 or 10. He stopped farming it, but like duck hunting's really big there, and it's really like, you know, sportsman's paradise, I guess is what they call it. Though I was never really interested in hunting and all those things. I liked fishing, but also my mom was a theater teacher, like I said. So as a kid, I was kind of had all of this like literature and all these things at my disposal, you know, like my mom.
Did she teach you how to act, or did you just pick it up from being around her?
She definitely, you know, whenever I was in like the theater program, she definitely was a great teacher. you know, she would lead some people to, like, we had someone play second in nationals or like big speech tournaments. Like, she was pretty renowned. And when she retired, she was teacher of the year in Louisiana, and then she got sent to Washington D.C. to give a speech with these other like 42 teachers that were chosen. And she's very, very influential person. And so I had her as a kid to kind of, you know, toss a book my way or something, and I would read it, like,
to get you in touch with like your artistic sensitive side kind of thing.
And I'm really thankful for that, because it definitely came up, you know, and influenced me when I started writing songs. I had kind of an idea of how to structure a story, you know.
Right.
Like,
is that something you ever think about going back to, or do you currently still act a little bit? Or
no,
anything?
but I mean, it's something I would consider if I thought it was something that I could pull off, or something I would be, you know, make sense for me to do.
Right.
Like when we do the music videos, I kind of get to do a little acting fix, which is nice. But if something came my way that I thought I could pull off, or I thought made sense, I would definitely, like, probably consider it.
So what brought you to LA then?
Theater is what brought, well, you know, wanting to act and wanting to be in the film world is what brought me here.
So while you were transitioning to writing songs and you know, becoming a musician and singing and all that sort of stuff, were you like going on auditions?
Oh yeah,
doing that whole hustle of the acting hustle.
I was doing like these Taco Bell. I remember doing these Taco Bell auditions. I remember doing a lot of silly shit, and I booked this like feature film, and I got Taft Hartley for it, which back then I guess was a rare thing to do. Like, I wasn't SAG, and I got an audition for a SAG film, and I booked it. Not a very good film. I only had like 5 or 6 lines. But still, at the time, it was a big deal in my mind, you know, in my like career. I was like, all right, well, this is happening. Yeah, I was like, all right, this is happening. But I just didn't like the process. I didn't like the audition process. It didn't make sense to me at the time. You know, whenever I moved to LA, in my mind, it was like acting was this serious thing that you like had to have this like some kind of process. And then when you're in this Taco Bell audition, like, you know, having to act out this silly scene, and I didn't understand commercial acting, you know. There was like this scene where it's 2 of us on this couch, and one of them finds change, and it's like, you know, it's like a 75 cents burrito. So it's like, oh, I have the money for it. My character is like, oh no, that's my change or something. But I didn't understand commercial acting. So I'm like going full fucking Brando in this scene, and the guy's like, no man, no dude, this is like, you know, it's commercial acting, man. It's like, lighten up a little bit. He gave me like 3 chances, and I think I did it the same way, the same time, and I was just like, man, I don't think
I'm
this
giving
is
you
for
my
me,
A game,
dude.
man. What's wrong with you, Taco Bell?
In my mind, I thought I was killing it, but it turns out I had no idea what I was doing, or I didn't understand, you know. Commercial acting is like, you know, it's not really acting, it's just kind of like howdy doody style shit.
Right.
But so that whole process was just really starting to like beat me down. I was like, man, I don't know about this, you know, 10 years going to go by, I'm still doing this, and have occasional successes that kind of keep you going, like, you know, some guest spot on some crime show or something. And I see that with a lot of people in the acting world out here. It's like they're still doing it because like 4 years ago they had booked this thing where they had like 2 lines, and that's kind of what keeps them going. And man, I just didn't want to be that.
So how was it for you then, going out and playing shows for the first time? What was that process? Like, where did you play? Like, how did you even go about
I remember doing like a couple, like this open mic thing in Burbank that my friends talked me into doing when I was like 20. It was just kind of really nonchalant thing. I think it was at that Viva place.
Right, sure.
And then eventually I started writing more and more and more. I remember the first time I ever actually sat down and wrote a song, I brought it to my buddy CJ, and he was like, hey man, this is pretty good. And it made me think like, yeah, maybe it's not that bad. I should keep doing this, you know. If he would have told me it sucked, I would have believed it and been like, yeah, this, you know, I'm not a songwriter. But I kept doing it. You got that
positive reinforcement, like right at the right time.
At the right time, man, because you know, you're kind of vulnerable. You're not really used to playing music or writing songs.
Singing and playing your own songs is like the most vulnerable. I think the only thing more vulnerable than that is being a comedian.
Yeah, that's very true. So I just kind of kept going with that, and eventually I put like a little band together, and I think I was like 21 years old. We had a residency at that place, the Cat Club, that Slim Jim.
Yeah, sure.
And we would play there once a month, and it was a lot of strange lineups, but I didn't really know about any kind of like Americana scene or country scene. And then eventually, a couple years later, I found out about the Echo and the Grand Ole Echo. And then I started attending that, and then that's how I met Ben Riddell and all these guys I'm really close with now.
Sure.
And then I started playing shows that made more sense.
I feel like that's maybe where I first became aware of you, or maybe we played a show together
That
at the
makes
Grand Ole
sense.
Echo, something like that. I feel like
Yeah, I used to frequent that place a lot, and it was nice because these were kind of like-minded people that were into the same thing I was in. It just made sense, and that's how I met like Brian Willen, who ended up producing a lot of my stuff.
Yeah.
And, it was definitely an important thing for me to discover that scene because it really kind of opened me up, and it really did a lot for me, I feel.
It seems like the LA Americana scene is getting a lot more attention lately.
It seems like it is, yeah. It's nice to see.
Does it feel like that for you?
Yeah, it's true. It seems like it really is. I used to go to the Echo like 4 or 5 years ago, and it's the same people at every single show, which was fine. I liked those people. But now when I go, like 2 Sundays ago, it's just filled with people I've never seen before, and there's a lot of young people.
The homegrown artists here, like, putting out records that are getting
It's
national
true.
attention. And
It's
all that
nice
sort of
to see, because it's not easy, man. It's a hard business. And so any form of success, I see folks getting in the scene, it just it excites me,
I mean, did you ever think about moving to Nashville, East Nashville, Austin,
Yeah,
any of these
there was
places
a
that are sort of
time-
more known as like, Americana alt-country hotbeds?
Yeah, there was a time where I kind of considered moving to Austin. I went to Nashville like the first time, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and I had a meeting with Dave, who I think you worked with, Dave Cobb.
Oh, yeah.
And we ended up recording some songs together. And I remember considering moving to Nashville then, but for some reason my mind always went back to LA. I kind of took pride in the fact that I lived in LA.
Right.
I felt like LA I wasn't boxed in. I feel like as an artist in LA, there's no expectation of what your record's going to sound like. Maybe if I lived in Nashville, people would be like, okay, well, this is going to come out and it's going to have this certain sound. I'm not sure. I might be wrong about that, but I feel like in LA, the possibilities are kind of endless as far as being an artist, especially a musician.
Right. And your records stylistically do kind of jump around.
Mm-hmm.
What's it like for you? I mean, after... you started playing music here, you got, kind of in that whole Grand Ole Echo scene and that world and all those folks. How is it for you when you go out on the road, or your first times going out on the road, like, where all of a sudden you don't have that scene, there's like 3 people at the bar and, I mean, it's like that's a different kind of struggle.
Sure. The first time I actually went out on the road, kind of like 3-week tour, was last summer. And thankfully, it was at a time in my career where I had put out some records. I had some kind of recognition. So it wasn't entirely a painful experience. Some of the shows there was a lot of people there and it felt good. But even the ones where there's, like you said, like 3 people, I usually find a way to enjoy it.
Sure.
It's just
that's where you really got to dig deep.
You really got to dig deep, especially when it's like, I don't know, 3-hour sets or something crazy like that. But it always kind of feels like an adventure to me. It's kind of like how I'm going to get my Kerouac fix in the safest way possible.
Right.
I'm not going to hop trains. I'm not going to hitchhike. I'm just going to be in a band, travel across the country, meet random people. That aspect I really love of the road. I mean, it's super tiring, super tiring experience. You got this big ass van. The label has me, quote unquote, tour managing, which is just a lot of shit, man. It's like, I don't think they realize who they're giving all this, these duties to.
Right, sure.
But I try to do my best, but it's like, man, when you got to go drive 10 hours, then you got to play for 3 to 4 hours, then you got to talk to the money man, then you got to get the hotel, and I'm sober. I'm almost 2 years no alcohol, and most of the dudes I play with are not sober. So this kind of becomes like herding cats.
Right there,
yeah. So now it's like herding cats into a fucking van at like 2 a.m. and it's a bit much, you know. I would rather not tour manage, but I do whatever I have to do right now at this point. It'll make me appreciate when I'm not doing it.
I was always kind of de facto tour manager when I was in No Use for a Name, which is a band that I was in before Foo Fighters, but I was very much not sober in those days. But I remember one time settling up, and I had like a couple grand in my pocket in cash, and I was just fucked up, and I kind of stumbled into the van, and the money just fell out into the street, and I didn't notice. And our singer was like, "I got a good idea. Let's make you the tour manager."
Dude, it's a lot of responsibility, man. I don't like being responsible for that much money. Shit.
Yeah.
You know, it's a heavy duty, but I mean, like I said, no one else is gonna do it. So.
Yeah, sure. Well, let's talk about your new record. So you got this new record coming out in June. My man Brian Whelan produced it, right? Who played on it?
Well, he wanted to do this thing where it was kind of like 3 different bands for the most part. He said he wanted to keep it sounding fresh. It wasn't necessarily a band record, so there's kind of a lot of different players on it. But Mitch Marine obviously played on it, like 4 or 5 songs.
Okay.
And Brian's almost always doing the guitar work.
I recognize his wonderful guitar playing.
Yeah.
Well, how is Brian to work with as a producer? I've worked with Brian quite a bit.
Yeah.
You know, he's played with me on tour, and we've written some songs together, and I'm a huge Brian Whelan fan.
Yeah, he's fantastic. He is great to work with because I feel like I make sense to him, and I don't really know if I make sense to a lot of people, but to Brian, he gets what I'm trying to do.
Sure.
And so when I come to him with a song or something, he knows, you know, he's good at telling me maybe rethink this line, or he'll say like, you can do better on this line, or maybe let's try this. And I listen to him because I respect him, you know? You know, anyone else telling me that, I'd probably be like, oh, all right,
Isn't that
man.
funny?
All right, man.
That is a funny thing.
Yeah.
It's so dependent on your view of the guy giving you that.
But Brian, I'm
advice.
like, all right, he knows more than me about music. He knows more than me about, you know. I don't know much about music theory. I don't know much about anything like that. But Brian knows everything, you know. He's like the Will Hunting of rock and roll or something.
Yeah.
It's just all stored in his head.
Yeah, sure.
So I feel more comfortable having him in the studio. I feel more comfortable having him around, you know.
Yeah.
And the reason I wanted to work with Brian first time was like 3 or 4 years ago, was because I liked that he had a kind of heavier rock and roll sound, and that's kind of where I wanted to venture into, you know. I had put out kind of a traditional country sounding record, and I was just like, I wanted to do something else. I had been done before, man.
Well, I like that your record jumps around like that. Like there's some stuff almost sounds like a little bit new wave. Some stuff's like rock and roll.
Sure.
So some stuff's like straight up country sounding. You know, it's like a mix of all those things.
Yeah.
I was surprised at some of the heavier, not heavy, but like crunchier guitars and stuff that are on it. You know?
Sure. Yeah, I love that stuff. And so I knew that whenever I saw Brian play years ago, I was like, man, I want to work with this dude. Anyone out in LA.
Would you like bring in the rough sketches of your song and he would help arrange them? And that
yeah,
sort of
sure. We would like meet at his place for a while. The first record we did together, he wasn't living in a house yet. He was living in this little place behind a house. And so I would go out there, and where was he living at? I forget where it was. Eagle Rock, I think. So I would go out there and we would just talk about songs, and it was actually how we got to know each other even more, you know, from that process. But I loved working with him. And like I said about the Dave Cobb thing, Dave and me recorded stuff, and then it was like, all right, you get some kind of deal or you get something, let's do the record. But I didn't have the money and the budget to go to Nashville and do this and get a place to stay, and I was just like, you know.
Did that stuff ever see the light of day that you recorded with him?
I think 1 or 2 songs were released. Like I put them out independently, but there was never an official release or anything.
Yeah.
But Dave kind of warmed me up to working with Brian, or warmed me up to really venture into that kind of rock and roll realm, because when I first met Dave, when I was like 21 or 22, I met him through the guy who was booking me at the Cat Club and everything. He was like, you got to meet my buddy Dave. We were in a band together. He's doing all this recordings with like country artists. I was like, cool. And so I met him at his place in Silver Lake. He was living
that
at
was
the
when
time.
he was still here.
Yeah, and he had a
Right.
studio in Silver Lake, and he played some of the songs that I recorded for this kind of country record I made, and he was just like, man, I don't think you're ready yet. And as a 21-year-old kid, that was like kind of this like
It's tough advice to
tough
get.
advice,
Yeah.
you know. It's like you're not ready to handle that kind of stuff. You're already kind of vulnerable because this is all relatively new. But he was totally right, man. I was far from ready, you know.
Right.
I was far from ready. I was just getting started. And so like 2 years later, I remember he saw I was coming to Nashville. He messaged me, he said, hey, let's meet up. So we met up, and he was like, send me some of the songs you're working on when you get back, and when I feel like there's something we can record, we'll record. And so I sent him this song, Mad Talking Man, I wrote, and he was super excited about it. And I was only playing it in E, and it was just kind of a whispered kind of State Trooper Springsteen thing.
Sure.
And he was pumped on it, and so I went in the studio, and we were getting ready to record in Nashville, and he's got all of Jamie Johnson's like super tough ass looking band there, and we're sitting there, and he's like, all right, play the song. So I started playing the song, and it's kind of like whispered, you know, and he was like, all right, man, move the capo up a little bit. I was like, oh, okay. So I moved it up a little bit, and I kind of sang it a little louder, because before then I was like a clenched fist when I would sing. I wouldn't really project.
Yeah.
And so he had me move it up even further, and before I know it, I'm kind of like shouting this thing, and I didn't know I had that in me, man. I didn't know. I always wanted to project, but I kind of had no choice. I got this band sitting there looking at me, waiting to see what I'm going to do, and then Dave's sitting there, and so I just did it, and it kind of surprised myself, and it's like, shit, how do you thank someone for that, man? After that, I was able to go back home, and I had this whole new realm I could write in,
Right.
this whole new key, and this whole new voice I could try to sing.
Isn't that
in.
amazing?
Yeah.
I had a very similar experience recording with him.
Yeah.
Where he moved, he was, you know, he did a lot to my songs, believe me. He moved them to added chords, done tons of arrangement stuff, but he, a lot of them moved into much higher keys than I had demoed them in.
Yeah.
And I remember he said something like, you know, yeah, they got to feel exciting.
That's
You
the
know?
kind of stuff he was saying to me too. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's good advice, because you're
It
like,
is.
God, I wouldn't have thought that I could sing that song in B flat.
Yeah.
But it sounds so much better.
It sounds
when
so
I
much
do,
better.
you know?
Yeah. And then I guess, man, that's why he's so renowned. That's why
Yeah.
he's done so well. I mean, I remember him telling me he was going to do a record with Jason Isbell. He was like, yeah, I'm doing it in 2 weeks. And then that studio I recorded those tracks in, that's where they recorded Southeastern. And I remember just being like, shit.
Yeah.
That was a fantastic record.
Oh,
and
yeah.
it kind of really, David already worked with Jamie Johnson and Shooter Jennings and all that, but he's really, he's becoming a household name for a reason. I mean,
Yeah,
he's
sure.
fantastic.
Definitely.
You know, how do you thank someone for opening that kind of realm? Like, ever since I worked with him, I'm able to just push harder. And
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Changes your
amazing.
confidence level.
It changes your confidence
Yeah.
level.
And that's so much of not just singing, but writing, all of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's all, you know, if you're feeling strong, you know, the
It's
end
true.
result's going to be a million times better. That's for sure.
And so that experience I had with Dave, you know, when I was out in LA, I was like, who's someone that I feel like is kind of has a similar mindset? And that was Brian. So
Right, yeah.
that's how I started working with Brian, and that's been fantastic, man. Like I said, I feel like I make sense to Brian. I feel like he knows what I'm trying to say or what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. He's just a wonderful guy to work with. I feel like playing every night on tour when we were playing together, I just felt like I was picking up so much from that dude, you know?
He's great.
So the record, you made your record with Brian. It's coming out in June. Mm-hmm. Then what? Are you going to go out and tour it?
Yeah, I'm
like a
gonna
mad
go.
dog?
Yeah, we're gonna go out on the road, I'm sure, and I'm really looking forward to that release because the label has really assembled a great team of like promoters and Al Moss working the record.
Oh,
and,
nice.
Yeah, and this guy Mitch Schneider's doing the promo,
Cool.
and it's just like I just got nothing but confidence in it.
Is this
you
the
know?
first time you've had like a real team?
Yeah.
You know, radio guy, a booking
Yeah, my
agent,
last
publicist, all that stuff.
Exactly. Last record we had that we sort of had those things, but we were working on a much tighter budget. And that was when I was with that label that Ben had helped put together. And I mean, that record is what got me the label I'm with now, you know.
That's your first record, Parish Lines?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That's what got me where I am, the label I'm with now. But it's nice to, this is like a whole nother kind of ballpark, you know.
Yeah.
So it makes you feel good to know that these are the folks that are representing you, and these are the folks that are kind of getting the word out, you know. Speaking of confidence, it makes you feel a lot more confident in the whole process and the release.
Well, it's great when you're out there busting your ass on the road to feel like that everybody else on your, you know, quote unquote team is also busting their ass.
It is a nice feeling, man.
Like I always say, like, you know, I don't care if only 2 people show up. If we did, like, if we left no stone unturned, like that's the best that we were going to do in whatever town that was that night, because everybody kicked ass to their fullest extent. And then you can just go, okay, well, that's what we did.
Yeah.
It's great. You know?
I agree, man. That's very true.
Well, I can't wait to see what happens, man. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Do you would you like to play a song? Some people do, some people don't. It's not a requirement.
Yeah, I didn't bring a guitar, but
I got guitars, man.
Sure. I mean, I'd be down to.
Let me just make sure that there's nothing that I wanted to ask you that I didn't.
There's one thing that I could talk about, which is the title of the record. If you're interested
Southern
in
Gothic.
hearing about that.
It makes me think of now I'm drawing a blank. You know.
What, True Detective?
No. Well, yeah, sure, that too. But no, you know, what's the writer's name?
Flannery O'Connor, Cormac McCarthy.
Well, both of those guys. But no, you know.
Faulkner.
That's the one. Oh, that guy.
Yeah. No, sure.
Yeah. So what does the title Southern Gothic mean for you?
So Southern Gothic is a form of literature I've always been a fan of, and it's, you know, has a lot to do with wild characters, and it takes place in the Deep South. But when I became a fan of this writer called Larry Brown around 2008, and he was from Oxford, Mississippi, and he wrote a book called Dirty Work and Joe that I really loved, and I ended up befriending his son, and so his son found out I was playing in Oxford last year, and so his son was like, hey, come on down. Larry died in he died in the early 2000s. So his son was like, come on down, and I want to show you around. I want to show you Dad's writing room. I want to show you, you know, this little cabin he built outside Oxford. I'm like, wow, it sounds amazing, you know. And I was toying with naming the record Southern Gothic for a bit, but I just felt kind of insecure about it. It felt like it was kind of like naming my record like Rock and Roll or something. You know what I mean? Right. I felt like it was too bold of a statement or something, or maybe I hadn't earned anything.
Southern
like
Gothic.
That.
It's like Lynyrd Skynyrd meets Susie and the Banshees.
Yeah, exactly. So I was just kind of, I go down there, I go to Oxford, and I'm hanging out with Shane Brown, and he takes me into his dad's little writing room, which is connected to the garage, and he's got all, you know, this stuff on the wall that it looked the way it looked when Larry died. It's still the same, you know, photos on the wall, and there was his like typewriter that he had written some of my favorite books on. And I just kind of stood there, and I like kind of rubbed my fingers along the typewriter, and it kind of felt like a ritualistic experience. And I was like, we were driving away, and he was driving in his dad's old Toyota Tacoma. He still drives it. And he was like, man, I just want to tell you, you know, I wish Dad was still here today. He would have loved you, would have took you under his wing. And then I was just kind of remember thinking like, all right, I'll name the record Southern Gothic now. Nice. I felt like I've somewhat earned this.
Right. Yeah, totally. It'd been passed down to you.
It felt, like I said, kind of like this like ritualistic thing where I was like, okay, all right. And that's kind of how the title of the record came about.
See, I thought you were going to go somewhere else. I thought you were going to be like, and when he wasn't looking, I took that typewriter and I stuffed that shit in my backpack.
It was cool, man.
Well, let me grab a guitar real quick.
Cool. This is a song about being a songwriter in Los Angeles, which can be about as confusing as it sounds. Well, he walks outside and lights up a smoke, takes one puff and begins to choke. Well, I guess it's been a while. And across the street sits an old tomcat, can't see what it's looking at. There must be a bird up in that tree. Where the cat lies down and licks its lips, 'cause high above success sits. Well, ain't that the truth? Well, he walks inside, picks up his guitar, tries to write, but he don't get far. This one is worse than the last, he thinks. Stands in the door where his love lies, sweetest thing neath these old skies. Well, how'd I manage that, he wonders. 'Cause out of all the boys, she chose me. No great job, no college degree. I guess she just has better taste is all. They talk about the future and don't it feel good for once in your life to be understood. He takes off his boots and lies beside her. Together they lie on a queen-size bed, and on his shoulder she places her head, and he drifts off to dream. Well, this dream takes place in the South. He's back in his grandma's house. She says, boy, I got something to show you. Well, this is your great uncle, fought in the war. Don't he look like a movie star? And that sweet little girl there, that's your mama. We had missed her laugh, he had missed her smile. She passed away when he was a child. Together they sit and watch the sun. He awakes with tears in his eyes, and grabs a smoke and walks outside. He sits right down on the porch. He says dreams are for kids, that we all know. And anytime I started to grow, well, I guess I just miss home. Then across the street came that old tomcat. Right by his feet it sat, with a mouth full of feathers.
Yeah.
Thanks, man.
buddy.
This is a nice sounding guitar.
Oh, sweet.
Never really fooled around with Martins much. I know Hank Williams loved them. They sound great. Yeah.
All right, that was Rod Melancon doing an exclusive Walking the Floor acoustic version of Feathers, which is not off his new record, Southern Gothic. I think it's off his first record. But get on over to rodmelancon.com. That's MELANCON.com. Or you can check him out at Rod Melancon on the Twitter. While you're at it, make sure you listen to all the old Walking the Floor interviews in the iTunes store and leave us a review, leave us a rating. It always helps. And I will see you next week from somewhere out on the continent. This is Chris Shiflett from Walking the Floor. Adios, amigos!